at the end of 24.
I mean, it's barely going to get started. So, I mean, I think if we're going to measure it, I think 5 years is kind of a longer time frame to measure the actual impact. Because to be perfectly candid, 2 years, I don't think it's long enough to do it. And if it's not working, then let whoever's sitting on the city council at that point, stop it or cancel it or not renew it, excuse me.
Well,
Or it can be canceled next year too.
Exactly.
I mean, but if you don't set up a way to periodically measure this or put, it's time to measure it or review it, then people are going to forget about it and think it's going to become standard policy. There are no fees.
City inspector, city manager can do that in 2 years, whether or not it expires or not. I don't think it really needs an expiration of the ordinance to do a review.
I am just asking this as the city manager.
Would you recommend that we put some language in the ordinance requiring a review?
I think it would be good for us to make sure that we are tracking it properly.
I mean, because I don't know how effective language in the ordinance would really be unless city management is I don't see how it gets on the I don't see how that helps, I guess. I mean, because you already have the ability to review anything you want, right?
Didn't we talk about that this information was available through the standard reporting?
It is
already?
Yeah.
And we're going to be, still doing that reporting. And that's also one of the reasons why, Mr. Mayor and everybody, we've put in this permitting, electronic permitting, so we can keep better track, especially when someone leaves and the new person's got to step in and figure out where these projects are.
Yeah, and I like that. I'm glad you put that electronic thing in place. I went on the site, and it was easy to navigate. I found, where I would go to do a lot line vacation. I mean, it's basically a small.
I know, consolidation.
Yeah. I mean, it's what, $150, $200 to the fee to file for it, but and that's not part of this ordinance to remove that fee, and that's fine. But yeah, it was easy to use, and thanks for doing that. Anyway, that was a little sidebar, but I agree with Scott, to a point. I think 5 years is a good spot, as opposed to the 3 that's proposed. I also agree with city manager that we should monitor it, because if after 3 years you guys learn, because I won't be here, but you guys see that the amount of activity is actually decreased, regardless of despite the relaxation of the fees, then you could decide that the relaxation of the fees didn't make any difference, and you can put them back in place. If it's the other direction, then we got double the activity. So all of a sudden, property tax base is higher, and et cetera, then you can extend it. So I agree that, but I don't know that needs to actually be in the ordinance. I'm not opposed to putting it in there. I'm just not sure who's going to monitor ordinances for trigger dates.
So just a second. Let's take Mark on he's got his hand up there. Mark? Try one more to unmute. Yes, we can. Thank you. Okay. Okay, thanks. Back to Doug.
It's kind of along the same lines. I'd like to see a sunset in there that just requires that somebody has to do something to keep it going instead of just one of those perpetual things. We forgot to do something about that. And I think the business of ensuring that people are aware that the program is out there and active. Otherwise, it doesn't do us any good to make rules nobody knows are there.
Sig, do you want to squeeze in here?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
But I appreciate it.
Good enough. Okay, back to you, Scott.
I was just going to say that, I mean, the whole idea behind waiving the fees for a period of time is to stimulate the permitting process, people to use the permitting process. If we find out that permits go down, that's not a bad thing. I mean, from a financial perspective, because it's negligible impact on the city. And if it's positive, if there's more permits, that's a great thing. We're achieving what we want to do. So I really question why we're even considering a shorter time frame. I'd like, track it. Of course, that's a great idea. I think we should be tracking it very frequently and ensuring, the people that are using the permitting process. And I think it's just one less excuse that people can use not to apply for permits, because we all know lots of people do lots of work without, going through the permitting process, and this just removes one more potential reason, legitimate or otherwise, of why they didn't utilize the permitting process. I think that 5 years is a good time. We track it annually. You can bring the numbers to the council and we can see how effective it is.
I'll be retired in 5 years.
So, but that's just my thing. I don't think we should just try it for a little bit and then let it automatically sunset, because the reality is it'll sunset and we may not even, this body may not even be aware of it when it does sunset. And so that's why I like having it for a good period of time. It gives us a good period of time to track it, and we're not talking a lot of money. The 60 or 70,000 you're talking about, Glenn, does that refer to historically permits under $500,000, or is that just all
That's
building
what
permits?
my understanding is, under $500,000.
The building permits under $500,000.
I mean, my job is to try to make sure everybody understands where the city manager is coming from. Typically, when you look at planning and code enforcement, it is not a service that city taxpayers pay for. It is a service that the users of the service pay for. In this case, we're doing away with that, with the hope that it is going to spur people to fix up their properties. And, maybe that fee was something that was stopping them from doing that. And if that is what becomes reality, then it's a win-win situation. But if it doesn't, then, I think the council should go back to the traditional model that these services are paid for by the users of this service. It's not paid for by the general taxpayer. And that's why there usually are fees related to planning and everything else, because when you look at what are the basic services of city government, it's police, it's public works, and then any other ancillary aspect to it, but it's more towards the basic services. I mean, and I'll mention garbage, and I know that's a touchy subject sometimes, but so in many municipalities, that service is provided by private haulers. It is not provided by the city. Here, it is still not provided by the city, but the NJUS has a contract, so we get the lowest price on garbage pickup by them making sure when people are late paying their bills, it doesn't impact the waste hauler.
That's a fair point. Is when there's a permit, when a construction or whatever kind of permit is approved and then closed out, is there, as part of that process, a follow-up if that particular permit increased the assessed value of the property? I know in my case it was. I just got a cabin up on my property. I wasn't even planning on keeping it there, but one thing led to another and it's still there. And the following year, my tax assessment was increased. So I'm assuming there's a follow-up process.
All permits are any permits are flagged that they go to the assessor.
Okay, so they have a list and they go by and check.
Yeah.
So I guess I would request as part of this tracking process, regardless of what the expiration date is, that we track that and see how much of the tax base or assessments increased as a result of permits that were applied for and executed. Because I think then that will answer the question, is the taxpayer really paying for everybody's fees, or is the tax base increases actually paying for it? That's
Well,
my request.
I don't know how our assessor does their process. I mean, I could tell you in other places I've worked, I know how they do it, but I'm not exactly sure how the assessor does it here.
Just having a way to track that, whatever the method, I think would be helpful, because that's why I like Gerald's idea a lot, is because I think it's similar to the ordinances that we did for rental property. It's gonna increase the tax base, and the city's gonna get reimbursed for it regardless of whether the individual user's paying for the permit or not.
So there's another issue that I'd really like to know. How are we assessing values to buildings in Nome, because it doesn't appear to be uniform.
Well, once again, that we have to bring the assessor
That's an
in.
assessment question.
Yeah, well, it is another topic, and it's something that we need to know about, because at least since I was on council, and I know it was even before that. And every time I ask this question, I never get a good answer. And it's like, well, I don't know, they tell us. Well, the issue is they work for us, and we need to be understanding how they are giving us this information, so that when we have two houses that are of equal value, but one of them hasn't been painted, it doesn't come out $200,000 cheaper than the one next to it.
Well, I'm gonna say, in most areas that I have worked in, it is typically looked at, one of the things they review is what houses have been selling in that area. And if houses are all of a sudden selling at $150 a square foot, they will turn around and say, if your house is 2,000 square foot at 150, it's now worth $300,000.
Clearly, they're not doing that.
Well, as I said, I can tell you,
I mean, that was the way that I was always understood, that was how it was supposed to work.
we can schedule a meeting with the assessor.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking even just ask the assessor how values are assessed and whether paint on a building makes a difference.
Brian,
That seems to be the big issue, but I think, we've got two more topics on this work session, and that topic could take up an hour or more in itself.
That topic could affect
Yes,
our current topic.
exactly. Well, I don't see how.
You look at, he did something to his house, and all of a sudden it pushes up values.
Yeah. Well, that's going to happen because, as the clerk said, all permits go to the assessor.
I guess what
and
I'm saying is
they flag them.
It doesn't appear to be fairly valued across the city.
I-
And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but we need to find out whether it is.
I agree.
We continually hear lots of complaints.
I agree.
I can say that assessments are done a little bit differently than fee appraisals, and which is often a comparable sales approach. There's a little bit of a different methodology. They're similar, but they're different. I don't want to get into the details of it, but yeah, we get the assessor in here and
Yeah.
should be able to clear it up.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. At least on the phone. Okay.
So we're good
So
for 5-year
we're good with-
expiration? I know you're
I'm good with 5 years. We can't really, we're not doing any amendments in the work
Do
session,
you have any
but
concerns about something significantly shorter or site plan?
the only other issue that I saw possibly with the ordinance is whether it's too broad or too narrow. I think it works the way it is, but
The way it's written, except for the expiration date.
But there's a possibility we may see something on values of properties. I mean, we're already seeing some single family houses that are exceeding $500,000.
yeah, and if somebody can afford a $600,000 or $700,000 house, they can probably pay the fee.
Well, yes, but I guess what I'm saying is, what if you build a duplex or triplex?
Then it's covered under the other ordinance we just passed.
Yeah, sorry. But we're pushing, property prices are rising and rising
Mhm.
rapidly.
Yeah, I hope they continue to go up until I want to sell my place in 10, 15 years, but yeah.
You haven't bought your plot yet, Gerald?
Oh, I bought the.
We're not raising those fees
I bought the lot next door. I can always repurpose that.
I'm sorry, that was just a joke, okay?
Wait a minute.
I already have my plot. Sharon and I already have our plot.
I don't have any more problems, Gerald.
All right. Anybody else? What was the next item?
All right. Next item is, actually, this is an ordinance to address high users of our 911 system. This is not to deny anybody the use of 911 or response from a call. But we have about 3 high-end users, one in particular who has made, depending on which way we interpret the information, from 150 to over 200 calls in an 18-month period.
I don't think they're keeping track of that properly because I've watched that individual make 7 calls within 15 minutes of me standing there.
Right, and the issue is, no matter what, this is an abuse of the system. There are other avenues that possibly those folks could take other than calling 911, other than having a police officer or EMT dispatched. Or if a situation happens, we could, find ourselves having to respond to 2 calls. One is not a necessary call, because what we're finding sometimes is when we say, no, we can't dispatch a police officer, or no, then we get a medical call. And that the individual is having some type of medical emergency, and obviously we respond, and it's just because the person wants to be transported someplace, usually to the hospital for whatever reason. And, as it was brought up here at the last meeting about the demand on emergency services, this has been a conversation that's been happening over the last 3 months, and to look at adopting something very similar to Anchorage, that we have a municipal infraction, and if we see the abuse, it's up to the discretion of the police department or the ambulance crew to have a police officer issue a ticket for abuse. This is not to say if person A called us 7 times, doesn't mean we're going not to respond, but maybe on the 5th time, that individual will get a ticket, and knowing full well they may see other tickets. And sometimes, these are mental health related issues. I've actually discussed this with the hospital in the past week about this. How do we work with those 3 individuals to make, less tone-outs for the ambulance and the police department? And, so just so you know, that's what the ordinance is on for first reading tonight. It's not to take away any services to be delivered. They will be delivered. But if the person keeps on abusing, they would be potentially issued. It's always discretionary. It doesn't say, okay, you've called 5 times, we issue a ticket. It's always a discretionary decision. And, I think that's something we need to have in the toolbox to help deal with folks who are overutilizing the system. We're not utilizing it the right way.
So if the calls, the abuse of calling 911 is by individuals with mental health challenges, is a $250 fine really, any kind of fine going to deter them? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Well, it may help them to realize that this behavior could cost them money and may help them to move or identify that person to the appropriate services that are out there. I mean, there is one person who probably needs to be more in nursing care than anything else. And that was discussed at, how do we go about putting that person in touch with the appropriate services? But the other individual, is really abusing. It's the 6, 7 or more calls, and people are being dispatched. When you send a police officer out and they're responding at a greater speed because they've gotten this call, there is always a danger of something happening. Ambulance too. It's if you send an ambulance with lights and running, there's always that chance that there could be that one day that something happens and goes wrong because you were making a response to someone who was overutilizing the system, and somebody else pays for that. And I think it's just something here to help address a problem that the ambulance department and the police department have seen.
Yeah, I totally get wanting to prevent that behavior, and I definitely don't want to see that happening. I'm just trying to make sure that we're addressing it in the most effective way that will actually address folks from abusing the system. And I know oftentimes fines are not a very effective way of keeping people from engaging in certain behavior if there's mental health challenges associated with it. And or thinking of individuals who, with those challenges, may start racking up quite the bill because of all these fines, and are they able to pay it, and is that going to then spiral it?
We come out of their PFD, and that's the way we would
If
look
they
at
get
it.
one.
Yeah, if they're not
Well,
already
I'm sure-
behind on other things.
Yeah.
I'm sure the community center is very good, and other organizations are very good to make sure people are signed up for services and benefits. So, I mean, not that it's something I want to do, but we can also report them, the question gets into how much could we say to the mental health folks.
So when you talk to the hospitals, was it with BHS specifically, or just the
It was more a higher
Okay,
level
okay.
conversation.
Yeah, I'm just curious if BHS had.
Because, I want to make sure I understand what services that we do have in the community versus what I'm being told, which is sometimes not correct. Because I'm hearing we're having higher level of services for those folks who have chronic alcohol problems, that there is there's a hybrid program here in Nome now that they can be in recovery for 10 to 12 hours a day and be based in a hostile type environment while they're trying to address their problems. And it's not where we would like to be, which is more of a totally inpatient, I don't want to say lockdown, but more secured environment. I don't know, folks, and as I said, it's a problem, and, it's impacting city services, it's impacting our cost, and we need to start getting a handle on it before those costs go right through the roof, which they're headed this way now.
And I'm totally supportive, if admin think that, and the hospital, in consultation with the hospital, think this is the most likely way to deter people from doing that, I totally support that. I just want to make sure that we don't create a larger problem for these individuals that maybe could be addressed in a different way, and I don't have a different way of doing that, So I otherwise support this. Just questions.
Because just so I'm going to throw something in that's kind of related and not related to this discussion. I think it's today, the
I
money
heard that
runs
over
out
there.
for anybody to be at the Nome, the Nugget Inn. So there are going to be 15, 20 people displaced. And we have no idea what that impact is going to be on our system, because now 20 folks or so are not going to be housed. They are trying to get them moved, don't misunderstand me, but it's going to be an impact on the community.
If there's a way to measure that over the next few months, could we get a report back on? Just out of curiosity, I don't know how hard it would be to measure any of that, but I'm
Well,
curious if it results in a significant uptick on anything.
I think for the 3 individuals, it might have more of an impact than, because right now they can only identify, which is what they've been telling me, 3 high users of 911. Now, if we can get them help, or we can get the hospital to give them help, I mean, the one person really needs to go into more extended care than where they are right now. That would be a help too.
Mark,
No, but they were the ones who brought the topic to me to bring to the council, Mark. Well, they brought to me the recommendation and brought to me the ordinance that the city of Anchorage has. This was run through our attorneys, just so you know. I have the fire chief, ambulance chief, all the same. Their lieutenant and full-time staff looking on addressing the bigger issue, which has been part of this discussion, the delivery of services, ambulance services, which probably we're going to discuss at your August 8th meeting.
so one of the things, it seems that we kind of did away with issuing citations for open container because they didn't go anywhere. You give them a ticket, I don't know if it was 25 or 50 or 100, whatever it was. But, it was just being racked up. And, I guess I see something similar happening with this. I don't know that Glenn and I are talking about the same people, but I certainly can, I can put some real life, direct knowledge to it. And as Glenn mentioned, a lot of it is utilizing the ambulance service or the police department as a taxi cab. And that, you get the call, it's an emergency, I'm having a heart attack. And, then as you stand a little bit back in the background and watch, there's a big conversation going on with these people. And then all of a sudden, when you get close to them, it's like this, it's an act that's being put on. And, so, Rose is good at knowing, and working, with, some of these folks, and, trying to discourage them from doing it. But again, it comes down to the taxi. It's a taxi service. And, I've tried to, just pay, for a taxi to take them up there. The cabs don't want anything to do with people that are in that state of inebriation.
Well, while it is still on the books, fines and, for ticketing of open containers. What the police have been doing more of, because I've been following this, is they're coming up, sometimes sneaking up with people and then catching them with the open containers. And what is even more painful is making them pour it out. And we had an incident just this past week right in front of City Hall. Someone here spotted them, police were called, they came up quietly, caught them with containers and made them pour it out. Same thing up here. And containers of liquor are being poured out. We may not be ticketing them, but they are being required to be emptied. Before you came in tonight, there was a person over there at the visitor center lying down on the ground, and eyes, you could just see, a little bit of his eye. Walked over there, could not rouse him. So Leon came in. I said, call the police. And incidentally, a police officer was just coming down Front Street. So we waved him over, and they got the smelling salts out and, could get him to stand. So what did we do? We took him up to the hospital for care. The police, we didn't dispatch an ambulance. So it is an issue, and we're not here to ticket people to death. That's not the purpose. We all understand that. But sometimes being able to do it is also, we want that tool in the toolbox. And I think you're not going to ticket yourself out of this situation. You're not going to ticket yourself out of alcoholism or homelessness. That's just my opinion, working over these years and watching the problem.
Scott?
So we currently have no municipal ordinance that addresses the misuse of the 911 system.
That is my
I
understanding.
think there's state laws.
Well, I've been looking, I haven't found the state law yet, but I didn't bring the right, maybe it is here.
So, I think it's, regardless whether, anybody's cited or not for it, I think it's good to have if we don't have anything on our books now addressing the misuse of the 911 system, that we should have it. I think, the concerns of it, we certainly don't want to discourage anybody, from using it. And I think that's my primary concern. You don't want to have somebody that's really concerned, I've called them twice in the last 3 months. Oh my gosh, you don't want that thought process, but I don't think that's what this is going to do. I support having something in there deterrent, whether it's actually effective or not. I think we need to have a deterrent somewhat in place, especially if folks are using it as a taxi service. So.
Okay, we're going to go to Mark here again, please.
Yeah, just real quick, is that we did hear from an ambulance provider last meeting, and I know this is kind of what this is coming out of, and we're trying to figure out a way to help deter that activity. But I did hear John, I heard Glenn both echo that we do already have in the books about people breaking the law with open container. And I personally think that we should be handing those tickets out left and right and let them rack up some fines and but it's following up with also the dividend, so that people have some type of deterrent, so they don't have to get to the point where they're having to call the ambulance because they're discouraged from the front end of it. So anyway, I think we should definitely increase our deterrent activity to help deter some of the activity that is already on the books and illegal. And I also agree that if this will help our ambulance service, I guess as long as we are cognizant of people that do have mental health issues that would not understand that they're actually getting fined.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I didn't find the state, because I thought there was something about, I mean, if you call 911, I thought it was a crime, not just an infraction.
Mhm.
But I'm not finding that, but I'm seeing that, Fairbanks and other places have this similar verbiage in their ordinances. And I think, again, whether we'll collect anything by doing it, but maybe perhaps the statistical knowledge that might come from it potentially could be used in trying to advocate for services for somebody. When you see that they're clearly, clearly have an issue, and whether there's anything that would help there. So, I mean, I think putting something on the books. I don't like things on the books just to have them there if they're not being enforced, if they're not being, if they're just, if there's no purpose for it, why have it? But, the fee, I mean, I think we realize that the fee is not necessarily something we're gonna collect, but again, attempting to modify behavior in a more positive, well, I don't know that it's positive, but hopefully it would modify some behavior by at least allowing the police and the ambulance folks to say to folks, this is not something that it's against the law. Basically, it's against the city law.
So I really want to get to the next topic, but I do have a couple of questions. And one of them, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but I mean, there's, if I call 911, say, fell, broke my leg, I can't drive, I need an ambulance to get to the hospital. Ambulance comes, picks me up, takes me to the hospital. I'm going to get a bill for that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's
And
issued.
that bill is going to be a lot more than any fine that we're talking about under this ordinance. So who's paying? Is the people we're talking about, or they're not paying the ambulance fees?
Well, I'd have to ask. If the police are showing up, they're not paying anything.
Right.
If the ambulance fees, it depends also what insurance they're under.
Right.
Because we only get reimbursed, I think, right now at Medicare cost, period.
Okay.
So,
So they may not be paying a fee to the ambulance, is what I'm getting at.
or, right. They
Okay.
may be
They are
paying
not
on
paying.
collectible.
They're not paying.
Sound may be paying on their behalf.
Or insurance company or
insurance
whoever.
We do
So
have a
that's
certain
fine.
amount of uncollectible fees, and every
Right.
city who operates, whether it's a volunteer or full-time ambulance, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees never collected.
And then the other thing I'm curious about, and I thought I had downloaded the packet, and now I can't find it on my phone, but so on all the TV shows, movies, and everything, you call 911 for fire response or something, and you end up getting arrested because it's a false alarm, whatever. Does this also apply to? Is it all emergency services, or are we tailored?
That's the problem with TV. I don't think we've ever fined someone for a false alarm.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of this is about
Okay.
for those particular individuals who are utilizing our service for other than real emergencies.
Does it cover all 911 type
I'll have to go
calls,
back
or
and-
is it
and-
just
Under the proposed ordinance, it specifically states as previously been warned.
okay?
So it's not somebody that just makes an honest mistake.
Right.
Oh, I mean, this is somebody
Right.
that's previously been warned, and probably, I'm assuming, repeatedly.
If they've called and said there's a fire next door 5 times this month, and
Well, that's a different,
I don't know.
but I'm sure that's not even something that happens here. So forget I asked it. There's no sense spending any more time on it. But the other, the who's paying the rest of the bill I was curious about, because I'd be much more incentivized not to call if I'm going to get a bill for $1,500 than I am for a $150 fine.
and it would depend on how your insurance is paid for.
Right. Well, I don't think my insurance would pay.
I don't
for
want to go any further.
20 calls in 1 month. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Whoever does end up paying the bill, though, seems like they would be incentivized to do something, or should be incentivized to try and provide an alternative. And that's really, I think, what, if we were a larger community and could afford it, and maybe we should look at it anyway, is to have, I mean, it's what the whole defund the police movement was about. It wasn't to eliminate the police. It was to shift a little bit of the funds that currently go to the police department over towards the social services component. At least that's the way I understood it. So that when a call is made, rather than having a police officer show up because someone's having a mental health issue, a mental health professional shows up. And I haven't thoroughly thought it out, but it seems like that would be the ultimate best practice if it could be done.
But we are not a borough.
Right.
We don't offer social services. That's not really within our wheelhouse, so it's come in a little bit because we're trying to, the city is trying to address the ongoing problems, which are, putting strain on it. And, and I've had a little bit of this conversation with the hospital, what can be done to get a better presence out there. I mean, I think there's been a lot of improvement in the last year from what we're seeing, but how do we make more, inroads to address the problem?
Get you a packet.
Okay.
I can just print it from here. Come on. Oh, yeah, there's one over there.
I'm okay with the ordinance.
Mark, did you have anything more there?
Thanks.
No, I didn't. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Okay, then moving on to greater participation in elections. This is something Gerald,
Yes, and something that council member Topcock and myself both.
I wasn't picking on you. I was
Requested.
picking on you so that you could be start the discussion.
Yeah, and that's good. So this is something that we talked about at some length about a little over a year ago. The intent is to generate more interest in running for office, as well as to make it more, well, I don't know that it makes it easier to vote, but basically trying to come up with something that would incentivize more people to become involved in city council, school board, etc. Instead of the same people staying in for sometimes decades. Stan Anderson and myself. And I'm sure there were others. So, and one of the things, and I'll start, I mean, I wanted this work session to just be completely open, no agenda, nothing prepared. So just an open discussion of ideas. But some of the ideas that have come up in the past are that, you know, an incumbent, especially if they've been in a while, seems like it's formidable for people to run against someone that's been in the position for a while. So some things that, you know, maybe term limits are an idea, maybe changing the way we vote for people would be an idea, and that's what we talked about last year was to make it so you're not running, so it's not if you're going to put your name in to run for city council, right now you have to say, okay, I want to challenge, you know, Gerald Brown for his seat, or whoever. Mark Johnson is the other one that's up this year. So, so to make it more like what a large segment of the population is in Nome is accustomed to, and that being the native corp election process. If you just made it so you've got two seats that are open, so you just vote for two. Okay, so you throw your name in to vote to run for city council, and instead of running for a specific seat, you're running for the position, city councilman. So that was one idea, and then you just vote for two. Can't accumulate your votes or anything like that. It's, you know, you have to select two different people. You can't say I want 2 votes to go to this person. So it's a little bit different than native corp elections. But so that was one idea. It takes some of the incumbent advantage out of it. Another idea that popped up when we were talking about it was to keep the seats but have it precinct related, and the individual that brought that up wasn't even on the council at the time, but he is now. So that's another idea. I'm not sure if that helps or hurts. I mean, from my research, that option is strongly advocated for in areas by minority groups, NAACP, etc., in areas where there's population densities of certain minority groups or certain demographic type. So you're more likely to get representation from that demographic if you're only pulling from that demographic for the seat. So that's definitely an option. And I'll shut up because I don't want to talk for 30 minutes, but any other ideas are definitely welcome.
So I don't know what you're wrong on any of that, but it seems to me the first thing we need to do is make people aware, and I mean, I know we always say this, we're gonna have education about it, but how do you engage people? Just picking people out of a crowd and changing people out doesn't really do anything. It doesn't necessarily give you better council representation or better council members. So I would think in a small community, you really would like to have whoever those better people are, people who are interested in being in the job.
Yeah, so we're trying to make it easier for
Sometimes
them
when
to
you have
run.
guys like you and Stan, for better or worse, there's some continuity of what's gone on for the last 10 years. And that's kind of important. If you're really starting to piss somebody off, then theoretically somebody's going to go, hey, wait a minute, I want to run against Gerald, or I want to run against Stan.
Which we've had happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk.
Oh, no, you're good. I was gonna say on the term limit, because I do generally support some form of a term limit. What I think we could do is build it to be flexible where, maybe you serve 3 consecutive terms and you need to take a break. And then that offers the opportunity for other people to come in who might not have. And I'll offer up my own personal experience, which I know I have blabbed about and people have heard. But the year I ran, back in 2018, so there was 2 seats, obviously, up for election. There was Lou Tobin's seat, who was the incumbent. Stan decided not to run. A bunch of us signed up for Stan's seat. I think that had to do with the fact that there was no incumbent. It's always, for me culturally, I'd say it's uncomfortable to challenge people. And it's not always that you might disagree with them necessarily. It's you might think that you have good ideas. And so when I made the decision to run, it wasn't because I thought I was the best option, but I wanted to provide voters choices. And if they thought I was the best choice, then sure, okay. But I very specifically decided not to run against Lou because I figured I had the best chance of potentially getting elected and giving voters more of a choice by running for Stan's seat. And so I think, and from other people I've talked to, especially in my age range and within my social circle, that always comes up. So every time I try to encourage people to run, the 2 excuses I get are, well, the incumbent is running and they don't want to challenge them, or 2, they have a family and it's too big of a time commitment to be on city council, which are understandable concerns. And so I'm trying to figure out, the last 4 years, what's really been on my mind is how do we, one, increase voter engagement? How do we get people to come to the polls and actually vote? Because our turnout rates are horrific. And I suspect that the demographics of those are lean one way over another. And then 2, how do you encourage people to want to be in these positions and make it less intimidating? Because it is a learning curve and it is a lot of responsibility. And when you run, you get dragged through the mud. Fortunately, I don't think there was a whole lot of dirt on me, but my residency was questioned. It was drama. I mean, it was not something that was very fun to deal with, especially when you're working. It's not like we're on assembly in Anchorage where that's your job. We do this out of our free time. I could be home dealing with so many other things or working, getting stuff done that I know is sitting in my inbox that needs to be taken care of. But sometimes I wonder why I'm sitting here, but I guess that's my concern is how do we get people to come and vote and how do we get them to run and participate as council members or mayor or any other position within the city. And what a lot of my tribes have been doing is moving towards not having specific seats, and I've seen a lot more success with those tribes that do that as opposed to the ones that have a specific seat designation.
So how do you mean more success?
In terms of people, so there's less vacancies on their tribal councils. There's more people putting their name in to run, which to me seems like a good thing. Again, because this is very small sample size here, so it's not exactly.
When I ran, I didn't want to run against Louis Green. Same reason. He's my senior and I grew up in this community, that's how you look at it. And it turned out in the end, I had to run against Louis because everybody else ran for the empty seat. And you shouldn't have an incumbent that's not challenged in some way, so.
And so I think, I don't want to cut you off. What I think is a lot of people, as they're, first of all, you're making a big commitment to run for council. Once you make the decision that you're going to run, you're then doing all of this strategic planning about which seat. And voters, when you come to election day, are then sitting there looking at a ballot and say we have seat A and B open. There's a lot of really great candidates running for seat A, but you don't like anybody in seat B. So now you're stuck because you would love to vote for 2 people under seat A, but you can't because of the seat system. And so that's the other thing that I see that's positive about when tribes move that direction. And if the size of Nome was different and our demographics were different, this is not necessarily the approach that I would advocate for. But given the size of our community, that's what I personally have come up with as a potential solution. And I'm not saying it's the right one. I think at the end of the day, we need to try something different. And I'm definitely open to ideas, but it just seems like right now we don't have a lot of people coming out to vote, and we don't have a lot of people running for office. And we should have a council that's reflective of our community and all the brilliant and the talent that we have. But I think a lot of people who are very well qualified for a number of reasons end up not running. So I'm just trying to figure out how to engage. And I would also love, side note, we attempted this at the very last minute last year to do a workshop on how to run for office, which is actually what I did when I was in Juneau. League of Women Voters did a workshop in Juneau about how to run for the Juneau Assembly specifically. I took it while I lived there. Ended up moving to Nome, which prompted me to think about running for Nome Council. But I think it's a little intimidating when you have people who are willing to talk through it and what your responsibilities are, the time commitments. I think we've done a lot better since I've been here, at least. I'm not necessarily at the very beginning. I think the mayor's done pretty good at keeping our meetings to a
Well, Adam's not here. We to all glory and praise we give him.
So I think having things like that in place help when you're not, because there's definitely been times where I've been in meetings past midnight, and that's tough. And I couldn't imagine doing this with kids.
So. Say the word education.
Let's let Scott talk next, and then
Scott Kaufman.
I'm fine, I was just listening. Good.
well, we're gonna let Mark talk too. And
I guess, yeah, again, I was against, before I came on the council, I was against sort of making the process more anonymous, and I know you don't think that it's more anonymous, but I do. I like the fact when I decided to run simply because I thought there was a couple of issues that needed to be addressed, and they weren't being addressed. So I didn't focus on one issue, but there were a couple of issues that I thought, you know what, this isn't working. And so it was that spurred me. It wasn't about, running against a particular individual or not.
Who did you run against? And sorry for the interruption.
There. And to be perfectly candid, thinking about it, I would not have looked forward to running against Megan because I probably would have lost, to be perfectly candid. Again, it's not because necessarily you're an incumbent, but you probably got a lot more people that would vote for you. It's simple than I do. But that's not really why I did it. I mean, it was issues. And I think that as we as a council engage in more issues that, for lack of a better term, are controversial, or it's not everybody is in agreement on it, that's what spurs interest. That's what spurs people to vote. That's what spurs people to run. And the more that I hear about people and what their position is on particular issues is important. To be perfectly candid, most of the time when I talk about people and talk to people about it and try to encourage them to run, I get the same, I don't have time, my family, obligations, it's usually a time issue. But the one time that I did get several different responses says, you know what, I'm going to run for office, was when we were talking about the package store issue, because it generated a lot of interest. And so I think as we jump into these issues and maybe tackle some of these issues that need to be addressed, I think that spurs a lot of interest. Look at, the participation, people showing up for those types of meetings is when you have hot button issues like that on the agenda. I've already talked to several people that are interested in running this fall, and not necessarily because of that one issue, but anything that we do that would allow potentially candidates to not explain what their position is on issues, I think does a disservice to the voters.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to vote for somebody if I don't know where they stand on particular topics. And then I said this before, and I'll say it again: any change, whatever that is, whether it's district voting or anything like that, I think should be put to the voters to let them decide, just like ranked choice voting was put to the voters in Alaska. In terms of, I proposed an alternative last year with district voting. I actually like the idea of district voting because it brings, I think, people out who may not ordinarily want to run to decide to run. People say it's too small. I don't think so. If we were to go down that path, and I'm not necessarily advocating we do, but if we were to go down that path, you could easily implement district voting. You don't have one candidate per district. You create 3 districts, roughly an equal number of registered voters in each equal districts, and 2 council members represent each district. And you have to do your elections where you're not basically running 2 seats for that same district in the same year. That's just an idea. But I think people, if they could say, hey, I want to run because I know my neighbors more, and I know the people I would represent more than the entire community. So I don't necessarily think Nome is too small to be district voting, but I think it would have to be established so you make sure you have equal representation. You don't have any irregularities. But that's where I'm at. So and again, I may have a different background, but I think people that want to step forward into the public arena should have to do that and should be able and willing to try to express what their position is on particular issues.
Yeah, and I
I
don't.
totally agree.
Okay,
Yeah.
one at a time, and then we're gonna get to Mark too. Were you done?
I am done.
Okay, then you.
Okay, so I don't think any of what anyone's discussed at all would limit the ability of candidates to express why they're running, and I think that really should be strongly encouraged. And we used to have candidate forums and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of boring when there's only one person running for the seat, but I would strongly recommend that we encourage the candidate forums, and I like the fact that the newspaper puts out the questionnaire and puts all the answers in the paper and that kind of thing. I don't think anything that we're discussing limits that in any way. The other thing I'm wondering is there a specific reason that you want to expand the number of districts? The reason I'm asking is we got a response from the state that we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to have more precincts locally than what the state uses for Nome. So we're limited to 2. So if we were going to go to precinct voting, it'd be 3 out of this precinct and 3 out of this precinct, which I'm relatively okay with if we don't go with the, that's my second choice, or at least it's not my first. Maybe it's not my second, but so you'd have 3 council members out of precinct A and 3 out of precinct B. 1 from each precinct gets elected each year, and that's. But you're still running against an incumbent, so that's where I see a big roadblock in people wanting to put their name in. And it's evidenced by the fact that when you don't have an incumbent, you have 3 to 5 people throw their name in the hat. Whereas when there's an incumbent, I think in the I don't even know how many elections I've gone through, but I've had an opponent, I think, 3 times out of 5 or 6 elections. Um, out of maybe, has it been 3? Maybe only 2 times with an opponent out of 6 elections. So, I mean, there is, but this year, I expect there'll be 4 people filing for my seat because I won't be on the ballot. So that tells me that, not having that name associated with the seat is gonna stimulate more participation or more potential participation, and that's where that original proposal came from.
Just ask the question: is long-term incumbency bad?
I think it is because
Maybe that people are in office for 10, 15, 20 years because they're doing a good job, and the majority of the community supports what they're doing.
could
You really
be,
want to take that away from the community.
or it could be that other people that would like to run are basically scared away. I mean, it's the whole incumbent advantage
People
issue.
gotta get over that.
Yeah, okay, let's go to Mark and then we'll come back around.
Sure.
Mark?
Okay, a couple things is when I first got on one of the first meetings I participated in, I also suggested that, and I came on when most of the council members had been on there for quite some time, and I raced against a fairly new council member, I guess. The motivation to do that, but most of the other people on there were on there a long time, and people, there wasn't a lot of participation. And I also thought that the way that the native corporations do it, where everybody puts their name in the hat for 2 seats, was a better method to maybe attract more people, where you weren't going against a particular person. And then also, I do understand Scott's proposal for having more districts to have potentially more representation, but I don't necessarily agree with it, mainly because I feel that Nome is diverse throughout the community, and that the reason for doing that in other communities is to have better representation from different areas, and I don't think that we necessarily need that. And the third thing I just wanted to mention was that when this came up before, the feedback that we got from the community wasn't necessarily strongly against or for any particular thing. It was just that they thought that we should, whatever decision we make, we should take it back to the voters if we change the way that we're going to elect people for city council, that we should give that a chance for the voters to decide if we want to change the way elections are held in Nome.
Okay, there was something between Gerald and Scott there, or was it Doug next?
So the thing I see right now is we're talking about how to get people to run for office.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe a bit of an issue there, but I don't think it's as big an issue as getting people to get out and vote. If you get people out voting, eventually they will get out running. So to me, it seems like the first thing that needs to be done is we need to figure out how to get people to come vote.
But are they not coming out to vote because they don't have choices? I mean, is it a chicken and egg thing?
You gotta start somewhere. So,
Right.
I mean, if you're not getting them out there, who's gonna run? How do you're not obviously not interested enough to run.
Well, if there's no contested seats on the ballot, why go and put your vote in?
I think if we have, and I don't know how to do it, but I think if we have some discussions in some of the community church groups, the shooting range, maybe in the bar, or maybe across the street, talk about why it's important that people go vote. And there must be ways to change the. I mean, I've lived here all my life, and it's kind of been like that forever. But some of us are always, it's part of your job. You got to go vote today. Maybe what it takes is we got to teach kids that, hey, it's your job. You got to go vote today.
Yeah, but
maybe the tide swells in the next 5 years.
how are you going to do that though? I mean, to me, it sounds like what you're saying is, well, nothing's going to work because the issue that nobody's ever going to address.
I don't think we can tear down a system just to change it though.
It's okay. I agree.
So maybe the issue is you change it as it needs changing by people thinking it needs change, or maybe they think it's running just fine. I don't know.
And that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to pick this one up again.
It's just- We're looking for different sides of the
Okay.
same issue.
Real
You'll
quick,
be last.
so if we're gonna do precincts, I want a demographic breakdown, racial breakdown, because there are parts of town that were historically primarily Native occupied. To the point about people being in office for a long time and whether that's a good or bad thing, I don't know that it's necessarily good or bad. I just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to participate and not feel intimidated by having to run against an incumbent. And I say that in part because if we look at the history of this town, so we were incorporated in 1901. At that point in time, my family were not citizens of the United States or of the territory of Alaska. We did not have the right to vote. We did not have the right to vote, serve on juries, to carry out any sort of civic responsibility and participate in civic government, including the city of Nome. Women didn't have the right to vote. It wasn't until 1924 that across the board, Alaska Native people and other American Indians had that right of citizenship. Prior to that, there was, in the interim, the ability under Alaska territorial law that if we got 5 white sponsors to vouch that we had given up our family ties and our connection to culture, that we could become citizens. And I think that trauma still is carried through many generations of Native families in this community. That's a huge block, I think, for a lot of Native people to participate in this institution when we have historically, and I'm not saying that this is happening currently, that there's any sort of necessarily any racism that's happening or whatever. And I recognize that we also have a responsibility to participate and get out and vote, but sometimes it feels really overwhelming. Like Gerald mentioned before, if there's only one person running and it's the incumbent, why would I go out and vote? If there's no other issues on the ballot or no other reason to go down to the polling place, why take the time of day? I have other things, other priorities that might need to be attended to. So I get that there's like a chicken and egg issue, and I don't know how to fix that. All I know is that what we're doing right now isn't working, and it's especially not working for Alaska Native people, who are a significant, if not majority, population of this community. Personally, it is very difficult to come into this room sometimes and to sit here as the only woman and the only Native, and to feel like I have to carry the burden. And I know that I don't really, just sharing this, sometimes it feels really hard that I have to carry 65-70% of this community on my shoulders to try to create a space for them, to set an example to youth that you can do it. If I can do it, and I'm not the greatest choice, I don't pretend to think that I'm any good at this. I still don't know what I'm doing. I struggle with this on a regular basis, but I try to get out and do my part to show others that they're just as capable, if not more capable than I am. But in the 4 years that I've been here, I don't know that I've seen that's part of why I was really advocating for a youth position. I want them to sit here at this table to know that they belong and that they have a seat here and a right to be here, and that they can do just as good as anybody else at this table. And so I think when we have these discussions, it's important to think about the impacts of historic trauma, the history of this community. And I know a lot of people are just tempted to say, well, that's the past, this isn't what the present is, but we know that trauma gets carried down through generations. It impacts epigenetics. It is a very vivid memory in this community. And so I don't think we can talk about election reform or any kind of reform without also having some acknowledgement of that. And I will.
Yeah, okay, we'll pick this one up again. Anyway, the issue of precincts, that's been discussed before, but as Brian said, we can't do it under the state. And I also talked to the attorney about that, and he indicated it would be problematic to try to divide, it would be more if you were taking it just asking to combine everybody into one, but to turn 2 into 3, there seem to be some legal problems with that. I guess we have term limits every year, is, the voters come to the polls, and if they, they can term limit anybody out at any point in time. So, obviously, there are those that disagree with that, but that's my stance on it, is that you are responsible to the people, and the people determine yes or no. I wholeheartedly believe that any changes need to be ratified by the voters, that this isn't something that we will just do around this table. And then it just was one thing that came to mind, and I just, I don't remember what year we actually changed our ordinances to allow booze to be sold on election day, but I would like to know what day that was and what happened with, it may have nothing to do with it, but I'd just be interested how the trend went, if there was any trend after that occurred. Hey, we'll take a 2-minute break if anybody needs to get up. Otherwise, we'll just move right on into the meeting. Everybody good? The faster we get going, the faster we're done. Maybe? Today is Monday, July 25, 2022. The time is 7:02. And call the regular meeting of the Nome Common Council to order. Actually, it's 7 o'clock. That clock's a little bit fast, so we're right on schedule. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson is excused. Councilmember Topcock. Youth Representative Hebel. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Doug Johnston. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes. We have our Board of Equalization minutes. They covered meetings of the 4th, 6th, 10th, and 23rd of May. Is there a motion to adopt the BOE meeting minutes?
Make a motion.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Brown. Any noted additions, deletions, or corrections? Not, roll call please on their adoption.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That moves us on to the regular meeting minutes from last 2 weeks ago, July 11th. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to communications, there's a memo from the city clerk with regard to a certification of a referendum which seeks to eliminate the seasonal sales tax. That's at page 17. Now, I'm not sure if this actually, I guess there's been discussion around the table in the past about the potential of eliminating this. I know the voters have to vote to either to approve a sales tax, but as far as a referendum on this, does the process, should the council wish to simply adopt what is requested, can they do so without, and that negates the need for an election?
My understanding is that you are able to pass an ordinance and adopt this. then you're also able to pass a similar ordinance that goes from 5 to 7% for a seasonal sales tax in the future, now that it has been adopted by the voters. That's my understanding from the case law from the attorney.
Okay, well, we don't need to make a decision on this tonight, but be on notice that there is a approved certified referendum, and unless there's some action before October 4th, this question will be on the ballot. Should the ordinance that increases a seasonal sales tax as approved by the voters be repealed? Any other comments or discussion on that?
So,
Councilmember Henderson.
the petition specifically indicated, as far as I'm aware, that this would be put to a vote, right? And so
That's
that
how they
was,
have to do it?
right. And the reason that this petition was, the signatures were gathered, was because, at least in the previous discussion, we were under the impression or the assumption, maybe incorrectly, that this, to change it, because an election was required to implement it, that the same process would be needed to get rid of it. And that was the underlying assumption.
Okay, well, I don't believe that to be correct, and I believe that you can't make a change to a referendum for a 2-year period, after which point you can. But we could not implement a sales tax simply by ordinance. That has to go back to the people.
So if we wanted to increase it, it would have to go, or implement the tax, it would have to go to the voters, but to take it away, it does not.
That's how I
Generally.
understand it.
Or if you wanted to do a 6% year round, because it's different than the seasonal sales tax, you'd still have to go back to the voters, even though it was less than the 7%.
Just as my personal opinion, if we have gathered the signatures to put this on the ballot, I believe that we strongly that we should put it back on the ballot and let the people decide. Thank you.
Okay, if there's not any further questions or comments on that, the next item we have.
Just one real quick comment, and that's that I would object to the city taking an official position in either direction on this referendum. So in other words, in any advertising about the election, about the referendum, etc., that it be as neutral as possible. I don't think there's a 100% agreement from council as to which direction it would like to see this go.
Okay, so the city won't take an official position, but that doesn't mean that individual council
No,
members
individual
can make their.
people in their own capacity, as long as they're not representing that they're representing the council or the city in making the position.
Okay, I'd like a little bit more statistical information so that we can. That may still be the end result of it, but I do think that we have a obligation to advise the voters as to the potential impact one way or another.
Definitely. But in a neutral manner, as much as possible.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have further comment on that? Okay, if not, we'll move on then to the next item, which is a overview of an article with regard to bird watching and the nature-based tourism sectors in the world increases, of which we have lots of birds that people come to, and I think it's an interesting read.
There you have a lay down.
Okay.
This was received in my emails, which I was going through. over the weekend. It was from Chuck Bakerstrom. I don't know why it was just addressed to me and this other person, but I just wanted to let you know it had been received.
Okay. This was a communication directed to Senator Olson asking if he would support sponsor a statute that would change the local option opportunities. Moving on to citizens' comments then, we'll take public testimony or comments, questions, concerns from the public. Are there members of the audience that wish to address the council this evening? See no indication. We'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. That brings us on to unfinished business. The first item is ordinance 220701. In second reading, Mr. Clerk.
220701, an ordinance of the Nome Common Council, Nome, Alaska, temporarily suspending certain fees for building, remodel, mechanical, and electrical permits for projects with values under $500,000.
Thank you. The time is 7:09. The council stand in recess to take public testimony on this ordinance. Are there members of the public who wish to address this evening? See no indication. The council come back at the same, or at 7:10. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 022? I'm sorry. Flip the page. 0220701.
So moved.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Henderson. Further council discussion?
Is this where I could make an amendment if I wish to make an amendment?
Yes.
I would request to make it, I would like to make an amendment to modify the effective date of the ordinance from December 31, 2025 to December 31, 2027.
Is there a second? Is that a second? Okay, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Discussion on the proposed amendment. Seeing none, roll call please on the amendment, and Joy's trying to get into the meeting.
Changing the effective date from 25 to 27. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, ordinance 220701 has been amended, or the proposal to change section 4, last digit from 5 to 7, so that it expires December 31, 2027. Anything further, or are we ready for the vote? Roll call, please, on the adoption of ordinance 220701 as amended.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion as amended carries.
Thank you. That brings us to resolution 220605. Is there, Mr. Clerk, by title, please?
R220605, a resolution approving a contract between the Nome Chamber of Commerce and the City of Nome for operation of the Nome Convention and Visitors Center.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance resolution 220605?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Topcock. This contract's been back and forth a couple of times to the city council agenda based on some concerns by members relative to whether or not they had a conflict of interest to vote on the issue. This contract has been out here in the public domain for weeks, and actually pretty much in the same form for years. There were some minor amendments that were made to it. The dollar value of the contract did not change.
It did not change, and it was approved by the Common Council in the budget.
Okay. Okay, so based on that, I guess the members, I'm not intending to disqualify anybody from voting, but do any members wish to put their conflict or perceived conflict and have an official ruling on that?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to, as president of the chamber, I'd like to submit that I do have a potential conflict.
Are you paid by the chamber?
No,
Okay, I think simply by virtue of how many people are on the board of directors? 11. The conflict would be so minuscule if it was there, that I'm going to direct you to. There are others.
John, I have something to say.
Yes, please, Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a conflict because I'm also on the chamber board and I also have a contract with my company and get paid by the chamber for accounting work. So I'd like to declare a conflict.
Okay, little bit different, I think, with the payment, although you've been providing these services for how long?
Longer than I've been on the board, but I still feel like it's a conflict, and I think you have enough members there.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to defer on a determination on that until we get through the roll and see whether we need you or not. Because the city business must go on, and certainly we don't want people participating if they feel the conflict, but I think that the community is well aware of your business and the fact that you're providing it to a number of organizations in the community. Anybody else want to say anything about this? Councilmember Topcott, please.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to say it was just an amendment or anything, but maybe in the future encourage consideration of the provisions that would encourage the visitor center to work with local tribes in the creation of materials and portrayal of the community's history and culture. I don't want to hang things up, so.
Okay, thank you for that comment suggestion. City manager has made note of it. Any other comments here before I ask for the roll call? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown,
yes.
Councilmember Henderson,
Yes.
Excused. Oh, no, yes, you can vote, yes, sorry.
Councilmember Doug Johnson,
Snacks,
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
put him on the end, please.
Councilmember Topcock, Councilmember Mark Johnson.
He can be excused.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, resolution 220605 has been adopted. That moving on then to new business. The first item we have is ordinance 220702. Mr. Clerk, can you read that by title, please?
O220702, an ordinance of the Nome County Council, Nome, Alaska, adding chapter 15.100 abuse of 911 system to the Nome Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass this on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage at the next meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Brown. Encourage folks to take a look at this ordinance. It proposes adding a penalty for utilizing 911 telephone services when an emergency does not exist. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock, Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to resolution 220703. Mr. Clerk, would you read that by title, please?
R220703, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Azavar Government Solutions for the provision of online sales and bed tax collection.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 220703?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Topcott. Mr. Manager, would you speak to this resolution, please?
Yes, this is a little unusual in front of you. This falls into my prerogative to engage this company in this service. But we wanted to make sure that you were aware as the Common Council that we are looking at hiring a company to aid us for the online recording, that businesses can record it online and for these collections. Now, there is one particular nuance to this. This company can actually conduct audits. If there is a question of whether the organizations, businesses, companies using this service are properly paying their taxes.
Thank you. What is this costing us?
Okay, Nikki?
There's an onboarding fee of $1,250 and an annual license fee of $7,956. So it's $9,206 for the online sales tax portal solution piece of it. And the audit portion is not starting until July of 2023, but that is, they would get 25% of our revenue for new revenues they find for us.
Okay, and audits would be conducted at the request of the city and not initiated by this firm?
That's my understanding.
They would bring it to our attention.
Okay. Questions with regard to this proposal? Councilmember Henderson.
I'm assuming the motivation to do this is to streamline the process, going from maybe a manual, paper-based, very labor-intensive process to a more streamlined online process.
We were looking at, there was a service that we were looking at through the AML. We decided not to move forward with that service.
Okay, so this doesn't duplicate anything that we already do. This is essentially, taking a burden somewhat administratively off of city staff
Well,
to help. I mean,
and
that's,
also, we are open so many hours a day.
no, I understand. I'm not,
And I think what we're trying to do is create more ease for our users to, they want to pay their taxes on weekends, at night.
Sure. No, I actually, I support the intent, for sure. Question about auditing. There's obviously a motivation on the part of the third-party vendor to conduct more audits. 25% gross commission of new sales revenue or new bed tax. And this is strictly bed tax, right?
No, sales tax.
So this is for online sales tax and bed tax, okay.
Wait. What was that now? It is or it isn't?
It's both.
It's both.
For all bed tax, all sales.
Okay.
So for all, essentially, on all sales tax, all bed tax. Does that include, how does that work with the remote sellers? Or does it?
It works, it allows us to not send any more people to the remote sellers, and then we don't get charged for sending people to the remote sellers.
Okay.
There were some companies that they would remit $100 to $500, really not that much, and we'd be inundated with paperwork. And then sometimes they'd make a mistake in the math, and then we'd issue credits, and then back and forth. It became quite burdensome. So we started looking at those, and we started pushing those once the online sales tax was up and running. We started pushing all of those customers back to the online one just because we deemed them not to have enough
Right, volume,
juice to squeeze it.
not enough volume to
Yeah.
justify the additional.
And so with this, we're not going to actively go after the online consortium to take them back, but we will stop referring anybody to them. And the online consortium is strictly for remote sellers, people without a physical presence in Nome, and this is for everybody.
So we're gonna essentially have two different vendors, the AML remote seller part of it and Azavar? Azavar doing it. And they will basically be collecting, so it'll be both. Do you anticipate an increase in the revenue generated with the use of this third party? I mean,
If you're talking gross?
yeah, just do you increase
Yes.
increase in revenues of either sales or bed tax, or is it simply a more efficient way to provide a more efficient service for payers and maybe a lessening of the burden on staff?
Yeah, this is going to decrease. This is going to decrease instances where we have been using overtime. When the sales tax is a pretty intense position and you have to keep up on it. We lost a long-time sales tax person, and there was a gap in there, and it was an all-hands-on-deck approach to resurrect it.
So hopefully keep a little more stability in terms of.
Well, this is going back, we've had trouble with the sales tax position before even I got here. And then, this gets into not depending on institutional knowledge versus having the information documented. So that if a new person comes in and we should see a change of health, that'll make it a little bit easier. Now, will it increase tax collections? It may. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not, but it's also going to, as because Brian's office deals with the most, because they're coming down to pay his staff. It's not going to reduce staff, because everybody's concerned as we move to this technology, we're letting city staff go. No, we're trying to make ourselves more efficient and better collectors, and making sure we are collecting who should be paying and keeping track of that. Because we have people, we have people that just drop in and drop out that we discovered when we were going through the CARES Act. They would be reporting one year and not reporting another year.
Didn't we use a third party at some point, this is quite a few years ago, to collect sales tax, whether it was online or just a third party we contracted?
You have for online, you have for.
Maybe it wasn't online. I'm not talking about the remote sellers. Here's my question. I remember we had, and whether it was a contract individual or something, and there was some clause, whether it's in the agreement, that compensation of that contractor would increase, similar to the structure of this, i.e., 25% cut of any additional revenue generated, which in my mind absolutely increased the desire of the third party to conduct audits. And I think we need to be careful. I mean, I think everybody should pay their taxes, but I want to make sure that we don't set ourselves up for a third party to incentivize them to essentially start doing audits simply for the fact of trying to increase the revenue that they're generating. That's my concern.
And that's why when we were going to enter this contract, that's why I pushed it back a year, to make sure that hopefully that everybody is going to pay their taxes properly.
Pushed what back a year?
If they start seeing anything, they have a whole year to get the life of a community, because we don't go in 12 equal months. We have some periods of time where people are not paying any sales tax because of they're not doing business. And then there's other times, there are other periods where they're paying sales tax every month. They don't know the community, and we want to make sure they know the community before they go out and audit and clear it with us.
So you put a 12-month.
Learning.
They have to have the contract. They can't audit at least 12 months after the date the contract is initiated.
So who initiates the?
Well, they would come back to us, and if we had any questions, we could, initiate our own audit.
We can already do that anyway.
Right. But if they see something that we missed, they would notify us, and we would discuss whether they would move forward with the audit.
So so it's up to you whether or not they audit it.
Well, it's, we'd have to hear a good reason, for
They can't go auditing people though because they feel like.
it. With that, we have asked that they notify us.
Um,
We've had this, this has been a very lengthy discussion with them.
Should be.
We reduced the fees to make it to where the staff felt we were more comfortable with the fees to take them to you. So,
Is there a reason to tie the online, the third party's revenue with audits? Is there a reason to have that, getting a cut of the increased revenue even in the contract at all?
well, if they find something for a reason that I really can't tell you, if they discover a reason, they should, we looked at it, they should gain some benefit for finding that. They are a service that we are engaging.
So the compensation is, and I apologize for slowing the process up, but so the compensation is $9,200 to set it up. Is that an annual charge?
Plus one time.
One-time setup.
And it's like
And then how are they compensated after the one time?
8,000 a year-ish.
8,000.
I guess like 75 to 8,000.
And you don't feel that, I guess from my perspective, I would rather see, and again, I haven't read through the entire agreement, I skimmed it. I would rather see a larger annual fee and basically not compensation tied to audits. I think that's something that I think can be misused. I'm not saying it would be, but I think the potential is there. And I would rather see an annual compensation that can be negotiated or agreed to by both parties and take out the percentage of income simply due to audits and potential revenue sold. I think that could lead to potential aggressive auditing. Just being pretty straight with it.
John?
Yes, go ahead. Councilman.
So I get what you're saying. And I can see where things could be abused when there's a financial incentive to abuse. But at the same time, we have existing ordinances in place that govern the audit procedures and who pays for what, depending on how much of a discrepancy is found during the audit. So I think that's somewhat of a safeguard against abusing the process. I like having a financial incentive for a proper use of the audit process. And it's used throughout industry to have incentives. I mean, there's a fairly well-known firm that advertises their services to businesses to challenge property tax assessments, assessed values, and they charge, I believe it's 50% of the first year tax savings for any savings that they realize for that business on the property tax challenge. And that's kind of the other side of it. But I think this incentivizes this firm to actually perform audits.
Exactly.
And I think that's a good thing because we haven't been doing audits. And I think there's a perception, at least on my part, and presumably on others as well, that a number of firms or individuals in this community are not being 100% honest when it comes to reporting. And there's certain industries that are blatant abusers in a lot of people's opinions. So I think having a process where we're doing more audits and capturing more of the sales tax revenue that's due to the city, as opposed to everybody else having to pay for those entities' failure to pay. I think that's a good thing. So
Have you ever talked to a small business owner that's subject to a pretty extensive audit and how much time and energy and cost it takes to comply with one? You're an accountant, Gerald, you should know.
you know what position I was in for
You do.
24 years, correct? Yes, I've gone through audits.
It's a rhetorical question, but I think whenever you set up the incentive for a company to audit with really basically nothing more than a recommendation to city staff, I think you're setting up the potential for it to be abused, and I am very concerned about that. So there's other people who want to talk.
But if there's nothing found, what does the ordinance say if an audit is conducted and there's not a significant discrepancy?
Can I, if you go to paragraph 7, page 55, termination, if we feel, or if you feel that there is an abuse being taken, you can give them a 30-day notice to end the term of the agreement. So,
The city.
the city. So you do have an out. I mean, the first term is for 12 months if approved. Then there are, I believe, 3 successive years after that. And you do have at any time, and if we felt there was a problem, we would come to you, Joe, and ask, begin the termination process.
So I guess getting back to the question that I was asking before, we don't have positive control of audit.
Basically, Brian can't
I think
say.
I think you do, because there is another section in there that if you are not happy with the audit, you can terminate that with a notice too.
Okay, Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I had a question for Glenn or Bryant first, and that is that, are we intending to use this form to replace the existing one that we're having collect our online sales, or are we going to be engaging into both firms? I didn't quite clarify that.
Both.
Sorry, what was that?
Mark?
No, I didn't.
Both was the
Both
answer.
firms.
Okay, so then the other part is I do agree with, I hear the discussion going on regarding the audit incentivization, and I also agree with Scott regarding that. I don't think that the contract should have any type of incentivizing them to audit as a way to earn funds. If we want to hire them to audit, I think that we could have the provision to do that, but to put that in, that their incentive to audit our local businesses, I'd be against that contract.
So I guess there's two pieces to this. One is just to make it simpler for people if they can pay online, and so that's what we're paying $8,000 or $7,000 a year to do.
Correct.
And
Well, excuse me, John, I do understand it being a tool to assist the current staff when we did lose sales tax personnel, and it's hard to replace them. So I understand that tool and them serving that purpose. I'm just more against the incentives for them to audit local businesses and earn funds off those audits as their incentive for doing it. I'd rather the contract be handled in a different way than it's currently written.
May I ask that you pass this? We'll have a conversation again with them on the audits. Well, you know it's not going to go into effect for 12 months. But, we would like, we found this firm had the best price. We had looked at other firms that would have cost us even more money. So, we'd like to get started, but we can have this conversation with them.
I think Mark and I's suggestion, and maybe others, is that we try to negotiate just simply a change in the fee structure. Instead of a compensation off of auditing versus a flat rate to theoretically compensate them so they don't feel potentially need to do it. Is that and to be perfectly candid, I'm a little hesitant to approve a contract now under the terms that have been presented without some assurance that it's going to be changed, because I'm strongly against this clause.
Well, as I said, if they don't agree to change it, you have 30 days to execute a notice to them, and they don't have the contract anymore.
So would you be comfortable with an ordinance then that specifically excludes that provision and passing it tonight?
I don't know if they would have, or either that, at this point, table it. I do believe, I will tell you this, I do believe that some businesses in town, because it's just human nature, don't pay their full sales tax. A lot of them are our smaller businesses, which we discovered when we were going through the CARES program. And all of a sudden, we found out they hadn't been paying taxes for 4 or 5 years because of how the city was handling it. Would it have broken the city's bank not to collect that money? No, but it still is the fairness and equity and making sure that whoever is in business and has to pay sales tax is paying that sales tax. It's not up to the discretion of the city manager or the finance director to say they don't. But I will just say this is just like the permits. We have had a history of this organization not keeping good records. And that is the purpose of doing this. That's the purpose of doing the accreditation, and is so that we are following things and keeping accurate records and going through on a regular basis now with the software that we can say, oh, why isn't this business paying their sales tax? Oh, because they just decided, frankly, no one had challenged them. They just stopped paying.
I appreciate your position, Glenn. 2 different issues. One is the structure of the agreement, the structure of the contract with this third party, and businesses that may not be paying it. 2 different issues. I support this from a reduction of staffing and reduction of the responsibility of the institutional knowledge and all of those things. I support it. I support looking at businesses that don't pay their sales tax, but I absolutely am opposed to setting up an incentive for the potential for an outside firm to audit local businesses aggressively. I think I've been pretty clear on that. So,
Okay, not good.
Councilmember Brown?
I'd like to make a motion to postpone action on this item until the next meeting, and also request that city staff provide in the packet a copy of the relevant ordinances related to sales tax collection and the auditing process of those taxes. Is the reason.
Okay, let's take that the motion is to.
It's awful long and involved already.
Yeah, to put it at off to the next meeting, and then under discussion.
Yes.
That stuff.
motion, just to postpone it? Is that-
Postpone to the next
Just
meeting.
postpone. I'll
Period.
second it.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Henderson to postpone.
There are 2 statements of work.
Yes.
behind it. You can just eliminate the statement of work that you disagree with.
Is it two separate contracts?
They're two separate statements of work.
Right, but I mean, are they linked? Are the,
Nikki is just text.
I think it'll be fine if you pass statement of work 2 tonight and we can talk with them about statement of work 1 with the auditing. I don't think they're tied together. We discussed possibly removing it once before, so I think at least if we could get started on the online sales tax solution piece, that would be
I
helpful.
wouldn't be opposed to that.
So we can pass it then without addressing the auditing issues or without the auditing component?
It's a separate scope of work.
Okay.
So
I would
I'll
need to-
withdraw the,
Hold on just a second. Okay, so the term,
Is it in here?
the term is in number 7,
Page 50.
55. And that's where the up to 3 years. Then I guess, I don't like number 11 on here where they're using our name in marketing materials. And that continues even though this agreement is canceled.
Well, John, normally, Mr. Mayor, normally that is a list of who have used their services. They would be, I don't want to use the word, but I'll be blunt, stupid to use us as an example when we are no longer working with them.
Right. I just thought it was strange that they said item 11 continues even though the agreement is terminated.
so I'll withdraw my motion to postpone. And instead, and there's no amendment needed to the resolution because it doesn't talk about audit at all. So it's just a directive to city staff not to implement that
Statement of work.
statement of work. No, the number one.
Number one.
The auditing's in number 1.
Right. Even though I personally don't have a problem with it, but that's,
So you would need an amendment to remove.
no, because all we're voting on is the resolution, and the resolution does not specify anything about audit services. So it would just be a directive to staff.
Contract and this,
Right.
the entirety of the contract includes statement of work 1.
You know, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't say anything.
Go ahead.
It's implied, if you tell us only section 2, that's what we do. You don't need to worry that we're gonna slide section 1 and get approval. You know, the city staff, and you've got Nikki, Bryant, and me, the ones who have spent the most time on this, and Nikki and Brian in particular, we've got your direction. We are going to sign the agreement with only section 2, and that's it. And I think that's what Nikki sent as basically as a text message. We're not going to go and approve something that you have indicated you did not want approved at the city council meeting.
So statement of work 2 is the one that does the sales tax.
Correct. Statement of work 1 is the audit. I'd still like to have the council refreshed on the sales tax ordinance as it relates to our current rules on audits.
And we can do that.
Because I really think that addresses a lot of the concerns that were raised.
Okay, any further questions, comments before we proceed with a vote to adopt the resolution with the understanding that the auditing provisions are not included?
can I ask a question? How will then the auditing issue be addressed in the future?
We are going to talk with them tomorrow, tell them what we're going to sign. And Councilmember Brown has asked us at a work session, which will probably be, is to bring the information on how we do auditing. And then we could bring part one back for further discussion. That's would be my way of approaching this.
Getting out online will be a great deal, I think.
No
Yeah,
argument.
okay, roll call. Councilmember Topcock, did you have something else? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item, please, by title, Resolution 220704.
R 220704, a resolution awarding the contract for the XYZ Alarm System Upgrade Project, North Star Fire Protection LLC.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 220704?
To adopt resolution R 220704.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Doug Johnson, Councilmember Topcock. Mr. Manager, would you speak to the resolution?
Yes, you had budgeted $125,000, plus there was $25,000, which the XYZ Senior Center said they would put towards whatever the cost was. We did have one bid that was up in the six figures. We had two bids come in. And this project, because of, once again, inventory and materials issue, has up until July of 2023 to get installed. So the contractors, this was discussed with the contractors, any contractors, I should say, before we put it out, what they thought would be reasonable, that timeline for us to expect it to get in, so that we would get bids.
Okay, well, fire protection is important. There are no further questions. Roll call, please, on the adoption of the resolution 220704.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our business. Moving on to utility report. Ken isn't here today. He's in Cordova for a conference. The utility activities are basically maintenance, and tomorrow we get the visit from the U.S. Coast Guard for their annual review of spill preparedness. And we have been in contact although there is a formal process when people have issues with the garbage collection, where you're to notify Alaska Waste. If you don't get a response from them, go to the RCA, to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. We do try to pass those messages on for you, but that is the formal process. And if anybody has any concerns or comments on that, you can talk to me directly about it. I'll try to be the peacemaker. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions. Seeing none, move on to Mr. Manager report.
Okay, we are scheduling a work session / meeting on the Alaska Nova Gold site for site closure. Part of this property is owned by Nova Gold, part of it is owned by Bering Strait Native Corporation, and part of it is owned by the city, where we have the Richard Foster building, and they want to begin the site closure. DEC will be in attendance by Zoom. We will have two of the principals from Nova Gold here, and the public is invited to come, and also, because the presentation is to you and any of the public that would like to comment on this, the site closure. Some of this process, remediation has already taken place with the construction of the Richard Foster building years ago. But we want to bring it to the state is looking at us to bring this to a close. They're looking, and which is what the city has been doing, working with Nova Gold and Bering Strait to come up with a unified plan for a closure of the site. So that'll be your next work session, and I'm not planning on adding anything else to that schedule. We had the first cruise ship here since September of 2019. And the reason why I know that's when I first interviewed up here. So we turned over 350 people got off the boat, and 350 people flew to Nome and got on the boat. We actually had 163 visitors to the museum on Saturday. And of course, a number of them also went into the library. So we were very pleased with those numbers. I also want to, you're seeing more and more prominent people come down with COVID. Senator Murkowski has just come down with COVID. So we still want to make sure everybody understands that the city still has free face masks for adults and children, and for those who want to have a test kit just in case. That they are available here, they are available at the Richard Foster building, and they are available at the Recreation Center for people to pick up. There is no signing any document. They can come in and just take if they don't want us to see who's taking it. We have put more trash cans out on the street, as in my note in my meeting minutes. We are trying to deal with the ever-present cigarette butt, and that's why we're putting more trash cans out and hoping people will put them in trash cans. We've looked at the little containers that you sometimes see with but they tend to get thrown around, and we're not encouraging that. So I just wanted to let you know, Polar Pools will be also here on the 8th, but they'll be part of the regular council meeting. Mr. Leeper is getting back this week. We are looking at $481,000 in improvements at the pool. You have $341,000 currently in NSCDC funds, but you're also getting reimbursed, I believe it's $377,000 in state funds for the schools. So this $481,000 project, I have been assured, will give us 10 to 15 years of improvements. It will also lessen the demand of us constantly having to fill the pool because of leakages. It's a much more friendly and safe environment on how the water is treated, and then it can be treated. It'll have what's called a SCADA system, so that it can be managed off-site, so that if a problem develops, we'll know about it more quickly. And it should also be energy savings for the school district in their bill, since they do pay the electric. And the last thing, we may have at your meeting starting property abatements, which we will also, when we bring the properties, we will have pictures accompanying them. So picture is worth 1,000 words, and that will show you the condition of the properties. And I guess the last issue that's risen is maybe needing a new heating oil tank at the Mini. It is a single wall 1,000-gallon tank that we are looking at it with serious concerns. We just replaced the tank behind the visitor center. And not only did we believe the tank was leaking, but the piping in it was actually scary when the tanks were lifted off, and the piping, as I said, looked like aluminum foil. So we may be recommending to you at your next meeting also to move forward. It is not a budgeted item, but I will tell you, if you have a leak up there, you will spend a lot more money than $15,000. So we bring money in and we recommend taking it away. And the good news is we are looking at getting a better interest return from the bank on the monies that we have sitting in the bank, because banks now want to go back to sweep accounts and then this week we're anticipating a 75 basis point increase in interest rates. So that's obviously a lot more money than we had planned when we put the budget together.
Great, and thank you for the department reports that are included, Councilmember Brown.
And the chief, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. The harbor masters and Joy's were sent to you, and they may, I don't know if they're at the table or not, but they were sent to you. We got them in after the fact. I think Joy is on the phone and she can comment on anything when we want to. But Gerald, Councilmember Brown, you got a question?
Yeah. You briefly mentioned the money from the state, the reimbursement for the bond. I believe that's what it was, right? The bond reimbursement money that got vetoed in prior years.
Prior years.
Right, and that's not contingent on us doing the pool, correct? We can use it for anything we want. You just mentioned that in that same paragraph, basically, as a means of saying that we have the money because we're getting this big chunk of money from the state, correct?
Right.
Okay. There was something else, but I forgot. So we can go to Joy or whatever, or others.
I guess go ahead with questions. Unless Joy has something that is earth-shattering that she wants to share, we'll come back to you, Joy, in just a second. Go ahead, Councilmember.
I saw that, I think you included, or maybe with your city manager report, it looks like a 2019 letter from North Sound.
Oh, yes.
Regarding the ambulance. I was just going to ask about that.
I apologize. At your last meeting, when a citizen got up and commented, I went and dug out, and it actually ended up having to ask Angie to send it because I had seen it, I couldn't find it. The proposal from 2019, because this was a topic of discussion before I got here. And as I said to you, we would be getting back to you by August the 8th. I have spoken with Angie Gorn. She and I had a lengthy meeting this past week. And I have spoken with the fire chief. If you notice, they're doing a lot of similar things that we are doing right now. And I will give you back a fuller report next time.
So it's simply informational.
Informational.
I also did want to point out earlier in the work session, there was some concern, I think maybe Councilman Brown and maybe Glenn, you as well, about losing 60 to 70,000 on the loss of permit fees. Looks like we're making 60 or 70,000 more on interest rates with our money, so give a little, take a little, I guess. But I pointed out, that's all, thank you.
Okay, Joy, thank you for joining us. Is there anything, we appreciate the reports we received. Is there anything you'd like to highlight?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think so. I just called in to see if anybody might have any questions
Okay, well, thank you.
on anything that I could answer.
I think we're good. We appreciate the reports. Thank you, Joy.
And just so you know, I forgot to mention this, Mary, you may have to put it under your report. We did have some Coast Guard folks pop in this week for a very quick visit. These were primarily Coast Guard folks who had never been to Alaska. So it was a educational meeting for them to understand the size of Alaska and the environmental conditions.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions for the city manager? Now we'll move on to citizens' comments. Are there members of the public who would like to address the council this evening? See no indication, we'll move on to council member comments. Can you call the roll, please, Mr. Clerk?
Councilmember Topcock.
Nice to have you.
Oh,
Please call.
yes. I need to get into my email. No.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
I've commented enough tonight. Have nothing further.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Nothing. Thank you, Brian.
Councilmember Henderson.
Hey, you left it all to me. So I get everybody's time here? No, I'm just kidding. I think to go back to the issue about the contract with for online sales tax and the tax collections, I support all the reasons for it. In terms of reducing workload, stability with our processing and everything else. But I think when we look at these city contracts that are often with entities outside of Nome, outside of Alaska, that really don't have an understanding of our community, I think it's really important that we don't create unintended incentives or consequences for them to take a little bit of, and I know Glenn will disagree, free privilege with our local businesses, and I think it's important that we don't allow that. Even the potential motivation, I think we need to be very careful about that. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. A couple of things. As was mentioned, we did have the Coast Guard here during this last week. It was 30 people, many of them that were like right here below the Commandant. And they were on a fact-finding mission, certainly in connection with the imminent port development. And while they can't make any commitments at this point in time as to what they'll do, they did kind of indicated that when it's built, they will come. I want to thank Cole and the Public Works staff, the port staff that helped, and Cheryl, I think, was involved in it too, Glenn, in getting Old St. Joe's set up for us for that day for their visit. They had to truncate their time here, so we ate and spoke at the same time, and then gave them a real quick tour of the port before they had to take off to Kotzebue. But I think it was a fruitful meeting, and that our time will pay dividends in the future. I wasn't here last week. I went to get myself a new dog, which, sorry, I just wasn't going to call in when I could do that. But I did want to back up to July 4th and thank Bryant and the city clerk's office there for their work and efforts on 4th of July. The weather was not the greatest, but it wasn't the worst either. And we did have a diehard group of folks that stayed and participated in the annual traditional games. And thank Bryant and the volunteers that he amassed for getting that together. Also, the cruise ship, it was great to see it back in dock here. And I'm not sure how many more we might have on schedule for this year, but it's good to be getting back to some kind of normalcy with that. Did have an opportunity to visit with several of the folks that were in town, kind of get their impressions. The weather could have been better, but they did enjoy their tours of the museum and those facilities. And Nome Discovery Tours did a great job in having organization for them here, as I think there were maybe 5 jets on the plane, on the ground, or six jets on the pretty much at one time sitting out there. So big transfer of folks, and it was great to see them come into the community. Then I guess Jamie will jump up and down if we talk about these dollars and cents in reimbursement. I seem to remember from her discussion during the budget that they kind of have a revolving fund with these construction deals, and that these funds were previously expended by the school district. They have to get on the list for doing things, and we can covet them, but I think we ought to make sure you work with Jamie Glenn there to see how if she can spare some to come towards the pool, that would be great. But I guess I'm not seeing that money is being deposited into the general fund necessarily.
Well, it's being deposited into, we do have a fund to deposit it into. And, we have, just so everybody knows, we have talked to the school before about the conditions of the pool. We just have never gotten down to a discussion on how much it was going to cost, because we really didn't have, a good idea. And I will be reaching out to her. Can this be piecemeal? Yeah, but I think in the long run, it's going to end up costing more money to do it in pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
Than going in and resolving it all at once. And just so everybody knows, even when they're planning on starting this, it's going to have an impact on the school swimming season, because it probably will not be until September that they'll be able to mobilize and get up here.
Yeah, it's just just as the city has a long list of deferred maintenance projects, the school has similar things, and so that was not the only reason that I brought it up. And it was there had also been a bill at one point there to pay the or they're proposing to take care of the school bond debt reimbursement, but I guess that one didn't go anywhere.
Nikki, can I ask Mayor if Nikki has any comment? Is she sitting up there quietly?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that last piece, but I know you're speaking of this $377,000 we're receiving, and that's from the school bond years that were short funded for those debt payments of 2017, 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Okay, I understand where the money's going then. Enough, thank you. We don't have an executive session on the agenda unless there is anything else for the good of the order. Go ahead, Councilman.
I'm sorry, I forgot when I was supposed to be saying something.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Cole and his staff and the city overall. City facilities and city response to the ship this time was outstanding. It was great. Everybody was helpful.
Cool. Put on a happy face and bring some more of them back. So. All right, the time's 8:12, and we will adjourn the meeting for tonight. Thank you for coming, everybody.
I've already sent the emails.
I figured you'd
The
be.
emails out.
Oh, sorry, Chief. I didn't see you.
Trying to hide over here.
Okay.